Welcome to Stories Worth Hearing. I am your host, John Quick. Today I am joined by Dr. Mary Talley Bowden, a practicing physician, founder of Breathe MD, author and health freedom advocate. Dr. Bowden has spent years working directly with patients and became a prominent voice during the COVID years based on what she was seeing firsthand in her medical practice. She is also the founder of Americans for Health Freedom and the author of Dangerous Misinformation, The Virus, The Treatments, and the Lies. You may have also seen her recently on the Joe Rogan Experience. Today we talk about her path into medicine, what she experienced during COVID, why she started Americans for Health Freedom, and what she hopes people better understand about their own health. I am glad you are here. Let's get into it.
Well, Doctor, welcome to the show. I'm super excited you're on. This will be really fun to chat with you today.
Thanks so much for having me, John.
Well, this would be great. So I kind of first stumbled upon your stuff a number of years ago, but then I recently saw that you were on the Joe Rogan podcast. And man, talk to me a little bit about that before we dive into your work, because the Joe Rogan podcast is like the biggest media outlet, arguably in the whole world. And you got to go on that. Tell me about your experience. What was it like? Was it surreal? How was he? Just kind of give us a little sneak peek of behind the scenes there.
Yeah, it was probably one of the most challenging things I feel like I've ever done. Not that he was intimidating. He was very warm and friendly, but just the gigantic audience was very daunting. So prepping for that interview was incredibly stressful. I brought one of my kids with me, which was fun. We were in and out. It wasn't a lot
Nice.
of socializing. It was just, but it was great. He was super nice, and his staff was incredibly nice. And the podcast takes place in this strip center in this nondescript building. You would have no idea that one of the most famous people in America was doing all his podcasts there, but it was great.
That's awesome. So take me back to kind of what made you first decide to get into the medical career. You've had some really awesome, I would think, successes and breakthroughs. We're going to talk about your book here in a second, but what made you first kind of step foot into the medical field?
Well, curiosity mostly. I loved science. I loved biology. I loved school. I was sort of a nerd, and I enjoyed studying. I enjoyed the challenge of the material, and I wanted a career. So it all sort of came together. It is very gratifying as a doctor when you can, I don't save lives every day, but when you impact somebody's health in a positive fashion, it is very gratifying. And, one of my big arguments with COVID was I wouldn't use this same treatment over and over again if it wasn't working, because that's just very discouraging as a doctor to have your patients do poorly and end up in the hospital. So I got highly criticized for using ivermectin, but I wouldn't keep using it over and over again if I didn't find that it worked. So, being a doctor is very rewarding when your patients get better.
Yeah. During COVID, it was probably, you were taking a lot of shots off the bow, and, a lot of the stuff that you took shots off the bow for, now folks have come back and said, oh yeah, ivermectin, it actually did kind of work. I took ivermectin during COVID. Talk to me a little bit about what that was like being in, your viewpoint. It's probably similar to my viewpoint during COVID, but it wasn't popular in the media to have that sort of opinion. What was that like being kind of solo on an island by yourself?
It was wild because I'm a mom. I was actually sort of working part-time. I just started a new practice. When COVID hit, I sort of thought, oh, well, this really won't affect me because I'm not in a big practice. I'm not in the hospitals, and didn't expect to get thrown into it at all. So I was blindsided by the whole experience, to say the least. But I just saw so much. I've never treated that many patients with a single disease in my career. I doubt I ever will. You quickly become an expert when you see the same thing over and over again. I mean, I ended up treating over 6,000 COVID patients. So I quickly figured out what worked and what.
What was it in you that, because I think a lot of folks would either, be fearful or scared of the pushback from the media, or not want to kind of stand up in the media for what you believe in. What do you think was that spark inside of you that said, listen, I'm not going to back down to this. I know it works, and I'm going to stand up for myself and my patients? Because that's hard to do. Most people don't do that.
Well, thankfully, they attacked me so hard that I felt like I had no choice but to fight back. I mean, literally, if they had come at me much softer, I might not have fought back so hard. But, they tried to destroy me. They went after me so hard. Houston Methodist Hospital told the Houston Chronicle they were suspending my privileges for spreading dangerous misinformation. And I found out through a reporter, and so that was such a gut punch that I just ignited a fire in me. Plus, I'm just seeing so much firsthand. I continue to see injured patients in my clinic on almost a daily basis. So it just keeps me going. It's very frustrating to me that not more has been done, or actually pretty much nothing has been done to help the injured and hold people accountable for what happened during the pandemic.
Have you seen the Trump administration, RFK, do anything to kind of course correct the COVID vaccine, or, vaccine scheduling, or come up with ways to treat patients that are having adverse reactions to, taking the COVID vaccine for one time and then 10 boosters later? Have you seen any sort of, oh crap, we need to help fix this from the administration that's currently there?
Breadcrumbs. So, they've changed the recommendations. They removed the EUA. There's talk that they're going to put a black box warning on the shots. I'm not aware of any NIH funded studies to help the injured. That's a huge frustration of mine because I feel like I'm just sort of trial and error. I have doctors across the country that I communicate with about what they're doing, and we're doing the best we can. But some of these patients are really challenging, and we're just sort of doing as much as we can. But, the government should step in and help the injured.
So one of the things you did, which I thought was very inspirational, is you founded an organization, Americans for Health Freedom. Talk to me about kind of the why behind starting that and what that organization does.
Yeah, so there was a representative, Brad Pequet from Michigan, who suffered from myocarditis following the COVID shots. And young guy, and he was tweeting about it. And so I connected with him on X and I said, would you be willing just to state that the COVID shot should be pulled off the market? And this was 2 years ago, I believe. And he wholeheartedly said yes. And that just gave me the inspiration to build this coalition of politicians who are just willing to, all they have to do is state that the COVID shot should be pulled off the market. But that's a hard thing for most politicians to do, even if they believe it, because it goes basically blackballs them from big pharma donations. And then, it's becoming less controversial to say that, but especially back 2 years ago, super hard to say that. So that list keeps growing. And when politicians join the list, they get free marketing from me, and I have a big audience on X, and I try to support them on X and get the word out that, to me, it's a litmus test. If you can say that publicly, that's a sign of integrity and courage.
So how big of a list are we talking about? Do we have a dozen on there? A couple dozen? What's the list like as of today?
It's about 250. We have 3 members of Congress,
Wow,
Marjorie
that's
Taylor
great.
Greene, Ron Johnson, Thomas Massey. We have the Surgeon General of Florida, but we have a lot of state representatives, state senators. We have precinct chairs. We have school board members. So it's a wide range of power positions.
So folks are going to be listening to this from all over the U.S. Could they go on there and encourage their elected representative to sign the petition? What could they do to kind of help spur this on?
Yeah, that would be wonderful. If you go to americansforhealthfreedom.org, there's a pledge. It's very simple. You could send the link, you could email it to your representatives, or you could publicly ask them to do it on X, which is what I like to do. Apply a little public pressure to them. But yeah, if we can just keep that momentum going, that would be great.
So you didn't stop there. You went on to write a book. I think it's out on pre-release on Amazon. We're going to put the link in the podcast description. Dangerous Misinformation. Talk to us a little bit about why you wrote the book and little sneak behind the curtains on what it's about.
It's my tell-all. So it's, I go into the gory details of all the abuse, and then, patients' stories, and it's unfortunately, the story is not complete, so I'm hoping there'll be a part 2, where I am ultimately vindicated because I'm still fighting the Texas Medical Board. We did have a win against the FDA, which was huge. The FDA, we sued them for misinformation, for stepping outside of their bounds as a government organization. They really interfered with the doctor-patient relationship. They put out that horse tweet, and they basically told people you should not take ivermectin for COVID, which they're not allowed to do. And we sued them and won, which is very hard to sue the government. So we're quite proud of that victory.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a huge deal. I mean, most people, government's got an unlimited amount of resources. And so to win against them is a pretty huge deal. What's your advice to folks that are trying to make a difference? Because, I think one of the things I love about your story is you're one person and you've made such a huge impact across the United States and probably worldwide. Had your message go in front of millions and millions and millions of people because you had a passion and a drive, not because you had some huge media company behind you. So what's some advice that you'd give to folks that are just stuck on trying to, how do they make a difference in this world? It seems daunting at times. It's David versus Goliath. There's 1,000 of them with TV stations compared to one, grassroots activists. So what's some advice you give to folks that are just trying to figure out how to make a difference?
Well, one thing I learned is, when you are faced with a huge setback, let it sink in, and then fight back harder, and you won't regret it. But there's always a low point before you get to your high point, and just, people are scared to go to that low point, but it's how you respond to it. And if you fight back hard, I have no regrets over. It was very hard for a while. I was publicly smeared, and I was embarrassed to go to my kids' school, and it was really bad for a while. But if I had just cowered, it would have been even worse. So fighting back, speaking up. We have, social media is our town hall now. And, for better or for worse, it's a great outlet for speaking your mind, rallying other people to your cause. And I would just say, getting involved, and it could be as little as social media is what we need right now.
What do you think your ultimate goal is with this specifically? Is it to have the government say, listen, we screwed up, we're sorry, we'll try to make sure this doesn't happen again? Is it to have it, doctors in your field of practice or similar be able to prescribe ivermectin or those kinds of things in a situation like this? What is your ultimate goal for, this movement you've created, Americans for Americans for Health Freedom? What's your ultimate goal?
Well, we need to move to a decentralized form of healthcare, because what we saw is when we've got these bureaucrats controlling everything. That's what we saw during COVID. We had these doctors who weren't treating COVID patients, telling everybody how to treat COVID from the safety of their bedrooms over Zoom calls, instead of listening to the doctors that were seeing everything and on the front lines. So, and that's because we have a centralized healthcare system. We have too much reliance on the government telling Americans how to manage their health. But, in terms of, finite goals, I want the shots pulled off the market. I want them to help the injured, and I want people held accountable for what happened during COVID.
Well, those are some pretty lofty goals. I hope you get to them. That sounds like you got a lot of work to do still. How do you keep inspired? Because, you talked a little bit about how folks could make a difference themselves, but how do you keep going? Is it your faith? Is it your family? Is it a mix of both? Because I think it's, you've had success, right? You've created this organization. A lot of people would just kind of say, okay, that's great. I'm going to go back to my normal practice. now and kind of live the quiet life, what keeps you inspired to keep moving?
It's funny. A week ago, I told somebody, I think I'm going to just pull back a little bit and just just go live a normal life. And then something made me mad and I'm like, I'm fighting again. So what happens is something happens to me and then I get riled up again. Or, I have a patient come in I had a patient last week who got a fourth COVID shot 6 weeks ago. So people are still getting these COVID shots and his health has been completely destroyed. So people are still getting these shots. The harm is still there. I'm still seeing the suffering on a regular basis. And so that's what keeps me going.
Is your practice taking patients from all over the U.S. or they have to physically be located where your practice is?
Yeah, unfortunately, the laws, I have to see them in person for their first visit. But I do have people fly in from other places.
That's awesome. So, one of the things that I think has stood out for me is, you go on I've seen you on numerous podcasts and those kinds of things. You got on the Joe Rogan podcast, like we talked about before. What are one of your favorite moments so far being in the media or interviews on, Fox News or whatever it may be? Give us one of your favorite moments so far as it relates to being able to get your voice heard out there in the podcasting world or in the news world.
Well, a funny moment that just took me off guard. I did an interview with Tucker Carlson and, he didn't graduate from college, but before the interview we were chatting and he just started reciting Chaucer, like Canterbury Tales from memory. And I was like, how do you know Chaucer? Like, I just found that so funny that somebody that dropped out of the college could recite Middle English Chaucer.
That's awesome. Well, I appreciate you coming on our show. 20 minutes here has gone by in a flash. I want to encourage folks. I'll put the link to the book in the podcast description and the link to the Americans for Health Freedom as well in the podcast description. Doctor, do you have any last minute thoughts here before we head off?
I appreciate you having me on and hopefully we can reach a broader audience. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you so much, Doctor. We wish you nothing but success here. And we hope you have a great rest of your day and look forward to the episode being out. Folks, like I said, the link to the book is in the podcast description and the link to the Americans for Health Freedom is also in the podcast description. And we hope you have a good day. Thanks, Doctor.
Thank you, John.